like the situation of presidents in courts where the change is happening, like the situation in some special institutions affiliated with the justice system. But at the same time, we experience that there are a number of institutional hurdles and problems that are more or less left by the previous administration. And so the question is how to do it in an efficient way, but at the same time how to kind of operate in a system where those institutional obstacles and hurdles exist. But I think the most important part of this rule of law process is recovery of not only rule of law values, but creating or rebuilding the trust of international and European institutions. So that is why one of the first decisions of the new government was to join the European Public Prosecution Office, so-called EPPO, or European Prosecutor. The declaration has been sent to the European Commission just already in December 2023. Right now we are formally part of the EPPO. We are going to start like this practical cooperation with the beginning of new year. The Polish European prosecutor has been already selected. The name would be announced in a couple of days. Because of number of other actions, and especially because of limiting like undue pressure on judges, that was possible for the EU to unblock the EU recovery plan for Poland, but also to lift or to waive the Article 7 procedure concerning Poland. So this procedure which says that there is this ongoing high risk of violating rule of law. Right now the Commission says and the European and the Council of the European Union that basically there is no risk, but it does not mean that we have completed the process. We are still in this process to go forward. But I would like to say that for me, for the government, this proper cooperation with the EU, building trust, building proper attitude in terms of approach towards the rule of law, strengthening rule of law mechanisms within the European Union, as well as multilateral cooperation, especially at the level of the Council of Europe and the United Nations, but also OSCE, which has its Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights here in Warsaw. It is extremely important because we are kind of coming back from 8 years period where those values of multilateral cooperation in terms of rule of law and human rights have been undermined. And I think today is a very interesting day. Yesterday, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe has elected a new judge to the European Court of Human Rights from Poland, Madame Anna Adamska-Galant, a person with a serious international experience. And why is it symbolic? Because 3 previous competitions for the same position has been challenged by the Council of Europe because of, I would say, number of formal and procedural problems and lack of trust into the I would say into the quality of the procedure. So right now we have a judge and nobody is questioning this procedure. And it is maybe a small point from the point of view of international relations, but extremely important from the point of view of international cooperation and regaining trust. But I think it is important to underline that we have this change in 2023 would not be possible without involvement of number of actors. And of course, if you would ask any politician, he or she would tell you, it is because of me, I started in elections, I was selected to the parliament. But in fact, what was especially important during those years was the role of the civil society, human rights defenders, bar associations, as well as academia in protesting against rule of law decline over all those years. Without the involvement of the civil society, without raising public awareness, without strategic litigation of cases, advocacy before international bodies, we wouldn't be in 2023. So, and because those values and the understanding of international documents as well as EU law has been strongly embedded into the work of the Polish NGOs and Polish attorneys, members of academia, it was possible to cooperate on international level and to all the time keep this flame of protest. And in my opinion, it is an important lesson for the European Union. And Poland is going to have a presidency in the EU next year, and one of our priorities for the next year would be how to support civil society, bar association, as well as academia in terms of their role in protecting rule of law, in educating people on the value of rights, on understanding of institutions, or how the institutions work. And second point I would like to mention is that sometimes in well-established democracies, we think that certain institutions exist, they operate, and we take it for granted that we have independent courts, we have independent constitutional courts, independent prosecution office, and so on and so on. But please look that it is extremely possible and extremely easy for populists to undermine the credibility of those institutions. And here what comes is the so-called lesson number 2 from the famous book by Timothy Snyder, 20 Lessons from 20th Century. And Timothy Snyder says, you should protect institutions. So it should be our role, not just to wait for bad things to happen, but it should be our role in how to establish a system in which citizens are treating institutions as their own, that they are defending ombudsman, courts, independent newspapers, independent media, because they understand that their value for the democracy is extremely important. So that is one of these messages I would like to underline during the presidency. And the third point is that if you are taking care about institutions, they also should have this deep understanding that they not exist because they are just in the constitution or different legislative acts, but they have to deliver to individuals a certain result. Like, for example, look at the Court of Justice of the EU. For people like me, the Court of Justice is important because it was the protector of the rule of law in Poland. But for hundreds, thousands of Polish citizens, it was important because it provided jurisprudence concerning the fight with abusive loans, with so-called Swiss francs denominated loans. So people started to perceive the Court of Justice as a protector of their consumer rights and not this very abstract and general value which is the rule of law. And I think that we should think about the role of the institutions in this way. So to what extent they deliver certain results and to what extent they communicate this result to citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, in the context of the Polish presidency, I would like to say that we are going to put those issues strongly on the agenda. Second, we want to show that Poland could be a key and important partner in rebuilding trust towards public institutions and strengthening the rule of law mechanisms. And we hope also that we would like to strengthen the role of the European Public Prosecution Office, which is important not only in terms of fighting against financial abuse in the EU, but also against any forms of circumventing Russian-related sanctions. And finally, I would like to say, and I really believe that Poland's role in the context of the rule of law should be not only about EU, but it should be also about strengthening the transatlantic dialogue on the rule of law and the cooperation within the Weimar Triangle. I really believe that thanks to all those connections, we can build resilient institutions and a strong state. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Adam Bodnar, for those important remarks and telling us the recent story of Poland's struggle for democracy and the great importance of democratic institutions and the resilience of institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be slowly moving to our next panel, an important discussion on the different dimensions of total defense. We're hearing so much about the military elements of defense on this forum, but it's so critical to look into the softer side of those components that are so critical for us to face the challenges. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a great pleasure to introduce to you the moderator of this session, Elena Lazarou, Senior fellow at the Chatham House and a great colleague here of our team in Warsaw. Elena, please join us.
So a very good morning to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here in Warsaw at the Warsaw Security Forum, and I'm sure you've all been enjoying but also reflecting on the conversations as I have. I'm Elena Lazarou, I'm a fellow at Chatham House, and I'm here today to talk about a very timely, very relevant issue with a very distinguished panel of speakers. We will be discussing different dimensions of total defense, a concept that is very much back. It's a concept that blends together military defense and civil defense, and I think we've all, in a way or another, been speaking about concepts that link us to that when we talk about resilience, when we talk about civil protection, when we talk about critical infrastructure, when we talk about maintaining state functioning, when we talk about health security. All of this links up to essentially safe societies, safe civil space, in a time when at the same time defense in its traditional sense, in its military sense, reacting to kinetic warfare and really stepping up every aspect of defense, territorially and otherwise, has become very much part of our daily life, as I think we're seeing here in this forum every day. So to discuss how total defense is implemented, is conceptualized, but also what it means to individual countries, we have a really esteemed, distinguished, and well-informed panel. Carl-Oskar Bohlin, Minister for Civil Defense in Sweden. Markus Mäder, State Secretary for Security Policy, Switzerland, and Major General Karol Molenda, Commander of the Cyber Command in the Polish Armed Forces. And without further ado, I will start with Minister Bohlin to talk to us about how the current security environment has, in his country, Sweden, led to the refining and the reconceptualizing of total defense and how this is being implemented. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. I think this is a very important topic. I think, first of all, it's about the notion of where we are in terms of the security situation and the realization that basically the whole of the Western Hemisphere needs to catch up with the security situation that has been deteriorating for the better part of 15 years. And that, I would say, has not been done properly, and that needs us to realize that time is of the essence. And Sweden, as well as many other countries in the Western Hemisphere, we truly enjoyed the peacetime dividend. And we didn't maybe soon enough realize that the tides were turning. So Sweden, back in 2015, after the first annexation, the Russian annexation of Crimea, decided to reestablish its total defense concept. But the pace of that work was quite slow initially because sufficient funding was not put forward. But what we've now done since this government took office in Sweden is that we are substantially raising the bar and investing in robustness all over society. And it's about the notion that preparing society for handling an armed aggressor, a dynamic antagonist, is something totally different than preparing society for peacetime crisis. And so I think it's about the cultural shift that needs to take place and that Sweden is undergoing right now. And it's about the notion that you have to do this in a holistic way, because the experience from what's now unfolding in Ukraine is obviously that all of society is put under enormous attrition and enormous pressure, and you need to sort of try to build a chain without weak links so that the rest of society can partake in the defense effort, and creating a strong civil defense as a part of the total defense concept is an integrated part of a modern defense posture and a part of our collective deterrence, I would say.
Thank you. Integrated approach, whole of society approach, I think is very much the buzzwords in this conversation. And State Secretary, Switzerland has had a long tradition in total defense. The national service includes both defense, military service, but also civil defense. Can you share with us your thoughts on how this history has influenced the way that Switzerland now implements total defense, how recent factors have changes, has Russia's war in Ukraine changes, and has technological change affected the way you think about civil defense?
Well, first of all, thank you also from my side to invite me for this important panel topic. Yes, the concept of total defense is not new to Switzerland. It's basically a product of the 20th century wars in Europe. As a small nation, Switzerland realized that it had to mobilize all its efforts and all its resources as a nation to actually be able to survive in such a challenging environment. And during the Cold War, that was then perfectionized into a system where not only the military defense, but all sectors of government and of society had to contribute for national security, basically. So that was also a strong civil defense organization which could take care of the population in times of crisis and conflict. That was also realizing that we need a strong national cohesion to be able to actually have a population which is ready to stand up for its values. But it also entailed a strong national economic supply situation. So to actually be able to get over shortages, and also, of course, in time of a conflict, to be able to deliver the key services and to have functioning critical infrastructure. So everything had to be woven together somehow in this system. And we worked on that during the Cold War and had a good system. And frankly speaking, after the end of the Cold War, the effort obviously was loosening a bit. The system is still in place. But now coming to your latest part of your question, now with the new situation in Europe, with the Russian aggression against the sovereign neighboring state, also Switzerland realized that conflict and war is back to Europe. And we also have to recalibrate, update, and further develop our total defense system.
Thank you very much. And you've alluded to that the conflict is back, and it's not just military conflict, it's also economic conflict, and it's also technological conflict, and it fits in very, very much with the Swedish Defense Committee paper. But I want to stay on the technological side of this conflict and move into cyber, because we have Major General Molenda, who is commander of the Cyber Command in the Polish Armed Forces. And I want to ask, how has the new way of conflict, cyber conflict, affected your work, cyber defense? We've had a discussion right before about, the resources, financial and personnel, that have been very much increased in your command. So how does the environment fit into the cyber defense sphere, and that in total defense?
A very good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here among such a distinguished panelists. So definitely, let me start with saying that technology shapes our reality. So it plays a ever increasing role with the way we handle our conflict, we fight our wars. And of course, as military, we have understood that digital transformation is imperative, and we are not able, or we cannot fight tomorrow's wars with yesterday's tools. So that was the idea of also having a balance with the technology. And my commander is responsible not only for cybersecurity, but also for providing solutions like networks to entire armed forces. But I could give you an example, because Poland became a center of gravity when we think about help provided to Ukrainians. So we have like a logistic hub here in Poland, where about 80% of help aid flows through. So you can imagine that because of that, Poland became on the target list of those APTs, malicious actors. So we have seen 5 times more attempts of attack on our infrastructure since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. So that is the answer from the groups that are affiliated with Russia Federation. And of course, they target not only military networks, but also our partners, critical infrastructure, transportation, logistic. So everything that is somehow involved in the process of providing help. So that is the reason we engage heavily, not also to keep the level of cybersecurity in our networks, but also to provide help to our partners, to inform them. And I believe the best lesson is that the speed of information sharing, because we notice that we deal with the same threat actor, who used the same set of tools, but because of the situation that we not share CTI or intel with great speed, we deal with the same problems or challenges. So recently we started lots of initiatives to change our posture from need to know to need to share. So if you see something that is targeting your networks or could be a danger to your partner, please inform in a speed mode. And that is the reason when we invest in our communication channels and to keep the information about a threat even, not on the secret level, which will take time to be shared, but on unclass if it's possible.
Thank you. And you've given me a good pass there with the sharing of intelligence, because of course that is something that happens within NATO as well. And Sweden has just joined NATO. NATO in its most recent strategic concept has also defined the cyberspace as a domain of warfare and where Article 5 can be invoked. And I wonder, what can Sweden bring to NATO in that sector of total defense, as hybridity makes NATO also very much involved in other aspects of defense, not only traditional military, but also further than that?
Well, I would say that Sweden could bring a lot to the table in terms of sheer competence on this matter. We were an early country to digitize and to adopt, and I think we were among the winning teams of the NATO cyber defense exercise that was being held, I think it was last year or so. But what I would like to say on this topic is that this domain obviously presents a variety of threat vectors directed straight to the civil part of society, and therefore it must be viewed as an integral part of a modern civil defense. And what we're now doing in Sweden is that we are trying to re-establish a new national cybersecurity center that has the goal to be sort of a one-stop shop for all actors in society that is providing critical services to society, to get help with incident response, to get help with responding to vulnerabilities, etc. And we're trying to work with the British National Cybersecurity Centre as sort of a role model for this, because I think they've done it in a very good way. So we will establish our new cybersecurity centre, forming directly under the National SIGINT Intelligence Agency, the FRA in Sweden. And I think that will bring a missing piece to be able to sort of handling the threat that this domain poses to the broad scope of society. Thank you.
State Secretary Mäder, together with the various concepts linked to the cyberspace and new technologies, cognitive warfare has come back with new meanings. And I know you've worked on this a lot, but could you tell us a bit about what policies and what kind of strategies can be employed to counter the threat of cognitive warfare?
Yeah, I think the threat of cognitive warfare is probably one of the most important elements of a total defense system, to be able to make sure that the harmful impact of disinformation and fake news and cognitive warfare, foreign interference, we have many names for the same thing or for similar things, cannot destabilize our societies, our states, especially free democracies and liberal societies have to make sure that they have a good balance between security and freedom. And because of that, it's probably one of the first lines of defense to be able to fend off and resist against such interferences. And I think it's also a very good example for why total defense is not just military, it's all together. You can only go against disinformation campaigns when you have all the actors working together. So the authorities, the intelligence service, research centers, but also the media. I think a strong and independent media sector is very important, which does the appropriate fact-checking and is still independent, but also is ready to work together with the authorities and the other sectors of society to make sure that we can keep our stability, even if some adversaries are trying to destabilize and cause confusion in our decision making and ultimately try to paralyze the ability of a state to act. So I think cognitive warfare is an integral part when we think about total defense and national security.
Thank you. And a big challenge there for policy making, because also education policy, bringing in the local level, all of it is linked. And as any policy choice, of course, I want to get to the thing that everyone thinks about or tries not to think about, which is financial and human resources. Where are they allocated when a policy choice is made, when a strategy is changed? And General Molenda, we've been talking about this a bit, and I wanted to ask a bit if you could give us a sense of how the cyber defense and has changed the way in which personnel is allocated, the skill needs and the financial needs of your command. And then I hope we leave 5 minutes for questions with the audience.
Thank you. So definitely from the very beginning of my journey on this position, when I was appointed as a plenipotentiary of Minister of Defense to establish cyber forces in Poland, I was aware that the key is talent, the people who will join us. And of course, I wouldn't like to hunt for talent. I was willing to create ones. So that was the reason we invest in different projects. Like we tripled the numbers of students at Military University of Technology. We established Cybersecurity High School, Military One, next to Military University of Technology. We established high school classes around Poland, 16 such, in every region. So after a few years, our resources, they are coming and joining our command. So nowadays, I'm blessed and privileged to lead the team of experts. Like we are about 6,500 of such, but we the resources are needed to keep the pace of technology change. But even though I believe that the lesson is not only that invest in talent and create environment that they could grow and upskill and gain knowledge, which is necessary in cyber domain because of the pace of technology changes. Nevertheless, I believe it's very worth to mention that communication, cooperation with others is as important because there's no single entity, individual organization that has all resources, all authorities, and see like networks or threats on levels. So we should and we try our best to communicate, to work with each other, to play to one goal. And in Poland, there's also a kind of concept that we create a center, like fusion centers or a integrated cyber center, when people like from different institutions will sit with each other and share with each other and synchronize their activities and coordinate efforts.
Thank you. So coordination, interoperability, avoidance of duplications in civil defense and military defense, all of these very much resonate. Now, I want to open the floor for any questions that may be had, or I can see a hand there, it's in the shadows.
Oh, me?
Yes. If you could have a microphone and identify yourself and make it short, please.
Okay. My name is Samuel Waite. I come from the USA. So my question is briefly for Mr. Bohlin. Back in January, you made a statement that there could be war in Sweden, and there was reports of children who called the therapist helpline. Do you believe that, sir,
I don't see another hand up, so maybe you'll take this one.
Okay, thank you. The short answer is no, not from the position we come from. We've had the fortunate circumstances to have peace for 210 years in Sweden. And so I think that also does something to the population, and to raise awareness about the dire security situation that we all find ourselves in. I don't see that as a bad thing, because as I sometimes say, that we now find ourselves in a situation where the delta between the best case scenario and the worst case scenario have never been larger, or not for a long period of time. And the uncertainties is very large. And to prepare for the worst case scenario, rather than just hoping for the best case scenario, is at least this government's approach to the security situation that we find ourselves in. Thank you.
I think there is another hand up. Like, it's in the shadows. Yes. Yes. Good
morning. I just have a quick question. The gentleman mentioned need to share. My name is Arthur Pishatowski. The gentleman mentioned need to share. How is need to share implemented on a society-wide basis? For example, see something, say something in terms of other threats, right? So how is need to share implemented on a society-wide basis when we as citizens experience a hacking or some sort of disinformation campaign during meetings within which we participate? It always ends up in a way, oh, just a little bit of laughing, oh, this happened. But we don't have a system by which we communicate to you as citizens in terms of this difficulty which we've encountered somewhere. And that's my question. To what degree does such a system or a plan for such a system exist?
Thank you. The question is for the general, but I think maybe later on we'll have the rest of you come in on this. So, General.
Thank you for the question. So definitely there always is a room for improvement, you know. So the question, of course, should be to ask my Minister of Digitalization, because they have a responsibility to inform, to create this security awareness programs. And I know that they're doing their best to inform societies. I can give you an example from my area, so from military point of view. So when we see our partners, because we depend, like military, we depend on civilian infrastructure, for example, logistic, transportation. So we establish channels of communication with experts dealing with cybersecurity there. And my team on the operational room, they are authorized to share all information that is needed to protect the infrastructure as well. So if we see something, if we have intel that shows that there's something going on, malicious activities going on, there's a vulnerability, there's a zero-day being used by APTs groups, our experience from knowing techniques and procedures used by APTs groups, we share with our partners. And one example from NATO, but something unique as well, which took place in Poland. So we noticed that nations are not willing to share information on class about cases like very severe, very affect their infrastructure. So we created a communication channel. We have a meeting called CERT Summit once per year, when like-minded countries sitting around the table. It is on NATO secret level, and the idea for that is you can sit around the table and hear the rest explaining about the cases that were severe in the infrastructure, but you have to show your case as well. And then the conclusion is, as I mentioned, we deal the same threat actor, we deal with the same techniques and procedures, but because of the maybe not as efficient way of communicating with each other, sharing with each other, we have to deal with the same cyber weapon.
Thank you.
In other case,
we're running out of. Sorry to interrupt. We're running out of time, and I do want to give the State Secretary a last word on this as well, so I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just on the sharing of information that is factual among citizens, best practice in 30 seconds.
Okay, that's a tall order. Maybe more in a philosophical sense, I think we all agree that we don't want a society where everybody spies on each other. But I think what we want is a population, a society which is aware of the threats and challenges, which is aware at what is at stake, which understands that freedom is not free, and which is ready not just to be persons concerned, but to consider themselves to be active participants in national security.
Thank you. Well, if we had any doubt that defense concerns each and every one of us in this room and outside, I think this panel has given us some food for thought, and I would suggest that next year the panel on the same theme have a bit more time because we have a lot to talk about. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you to the speakers and to the forum.